Hello, 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 and welcome in to the first episode of the Bear Claw podcast presented by Bear Claw Media. I am Chris Bolin, and joining me, as he certainly will almost always be, Ben Schleiger. How you doing, Ben?
Good. How we doing tonight, Chris?
Not too bad. You know, it's a little rainy outside, so the hottest room in the house isn't miserably hot tonight. So excited to get this off the ground. Excited to talk some Big Sky football. Just ready to get going.
Yeah. The guys have started camp. It's exciting with everybody reporting back to campus. Got the throwback, map work survey 2017
Love it.
survey. Did that for $5 in a t-shirt. Trying to get the spirit going, and the closer we get to the start of college football and just the start of football in general. I mean, we had the Hall of Fame game. It's good to have football back.
Yeah, I guess on that we should say we're recording on a Sunday, August 6th. Less than a month till we have actual games. About 2 weeks out of Big Sky Media Days when they released their polls, their preseason predictions. We released our preseason poll 12 hours before that, so we nailed that one. But I feel like it probably only makes sense to start with our bread and butter and look at UNC first.
Yeah, UNC coming in with a different flavor this year. Getting the Ed Lamb Kool-Aid, as we were talking about. It just feels like a smoother, more reliable drink. The McCaffrey saga made headlines for all the wrong reasons ever since they took the field. And this should be a good start to a new chapter for them. They definitely have their work cut out for them because they've gone through a lot of heartache with transfers, new coaches, just trying to find that identity. We'll see what they can do this year, but it's going to be a steep schedule. We had them towards the back of the sky, and both the media conference and the media and the coaches poll had them at 10th.
Yeah, and I think since we did those polls in the back end of July, I think I have been drinking that Ed Lamb Kool-Aid a lot more. Obviously, we're much closer to this UNC program than we are any of the others, but I'm liking everything I'm hearing. I haven't heard the word rebuild much, which seems intentional.
Right. It does not seem like that's his MO at all. He's all about hitting the ground running, hard work, doing things the right way. I mean, in spring practice, I think it was in the first 2 weeks of spring practice, he was already bringing up like, hey guys, like don't drink, like treat your body right. He was giving them not necessarily rules, but giving them ways to succeed through discipline and sacrifice. And that's not what we heard before. Before it was flashy. This is all about hard work, good work ethic, succeeding in the classroom, succeeding in health, life. This is a better overall, a lot closer to Ernest Collins. But as much as we love the Collins era and how good of a guy he was, Ed Lamb has a bit more of a winning resume. We'll see if getting back to the good wholesome approach is going to be the better approach for UNC.
Yeah, and I think that resume you mentioned is kind of why it feels like it may not be as big of a rebuild as everybody thinks, or at least most people outside of the program. Because when Lamb took over at Southern Utah, I think they were on a 17-game losing streak. They had went winless the season before. And I think they went 4-7 in that first season with him. And, he talks about the talent that this roster has from McCaffrey and even some Ernest Collins holdovers.
Right. And that's a big thing to admit that, that those kids have stuck through it and that he's got them to buy into it, because not everybody can do that. The transfer portal, it's such a fluid time in college football. For him to admit another two coaches did something right and added to the program is a great thing, to have that humility, but also to recognize those players that can be playmakers no matter who they came from.
Yeah, great transition there. So let's take a look at a few of the playmakers on this roster. I think with just about any team, it kind of starts with quarterback. And Jacob Sermon hasn't panned out exactly like his college career. His college career hasn't exactly panned out like I'm sure he planned it, starting at Washington and then going to CMU before landing here in UNC. But I think the pedigree's there, the talent is there. It's just kind of unlocking it, I think.
Right. Getting him some consistent playing time is going to be the biggest thing because he showed really good poise when he did have reins that Eddie gave him, or when Dylan went down. He showed a
When they were
good
down
thing.
55-7 every third game.
Yeah, the amount of comeback in that kid is ridiculous. It wasn't always great. There were some errant passes or just some miscommunications that led to turnovers. So that's going to be the biggest thing is, being that starter, he's got to not only, keep that talent consistent, but he's got to keep the mistakes down too, just to keep the confidence high, especially in one of these bottom feeder type teams. You already have that reputation of things are going to be against you the whole year. You got to keep morale higher than some of the top teams just because you have so much more work ahead of you.
Yeah, and I think keeping his mistakes down will especially be important because I do think this Bears defense can compete. Getting David Hogue back is going to be important after he missed last season, and then Jordan Napke. Sorry, my notes are a little bit hidden behind my microphone here, but I think the Bears they have a chance to be in some games that I think a lot of people aren't expecting them to be in.
Right. I mean, with subpar talent in the past years, they've done a lot of things and had a lot of players that have developed themselves from, just a good JUCO player to a really respectable all conference Big Sky player. And with these guys like Jordan Apke, he's aggressive, he's after the ball, he's blown guys up. He's a force in the backfield. And then if we can have someone up front disrupting the quarterback play and those trick plays like Hogue can provide for us, that's going to be huge because I think that's the biggest thing that we were missing is that we were relying on our secondary the last 2 years, and while we might have some dogs out there just absolutely grinding, um, there's only so much you can put on them before they get tired. They got to sub out. Guy behind him's trying his best, but he's just not going to match up against the ones as well. If we have Hogue and some of the other transfers we have that brought in just to bring that pressure, crash down that line a little bit, it'll give us a lot of relief, and it'll look like the defense that they show themselves to be at times more consistently and more respectively.
All right, then let's take a look at the schedule. See who they get approved against. They start their season going to Abilene against Abilene Christian. Um, I think that'll be a good test really early to see where this team is because I think this season could go a lot of different ways. Like I think there's a bunch of different outcomes that could happen here. So win or lose, I think just seeing where the team's at that first game will be important.
Yeah, that'll be a big step for them. I mean, it's going to be a strange game. They're on the road. It's a Thursday night. It's a 6 p.m. game. Unfortunately, we're not used to night games here in Greeley, but hopefully with the Ed Lamb era that changes. They had talks about it. We'll see if that happens, but it's a weird start to a game. Just throwing your schedule off. You don't have that same preparation. You're gonna have longer preparation after it for the next home game against Incarnate Word. Um, for Abilene Christian, we have a fun history against them. I'm pretty sure that's the game where Kyle Sloter popped off. So if they want
Always
to,
love a Sloter shout out.
right? Oh yeah, Team Sloter all the way. Love it. Follow him no matter what. But I mean, yeah, they were 7-4 last year. They did have some respectable for performances in that. I mean, they only lost by 3 points to SFA when they were ranked 22, and they beat pseudo FBS Sam Houston 45-28. So they're a real team. I mean, that 3 point loss to 23 North Dakota, it's a good team, but they're a good team in a conference that generally recruits a lot lower than the Big Sky. So I think even though they're a 7-4 team in their conference, that if we play up to a 500 team or a 4-win team in the Big Sky, that game could be competitive.
Yeah, and that one will be pretty important too, because you mentioned Abilene Christian the next week, but then after that, they're playing at Washington State. So if they can't steal that first one, there's a good chance they do start 0-3. Um,
Yeah, that could be a tough
heading it,
stretch for him. I mean, Incarnate Word has definitely elevated themselves to a national spotlight with Cam Ward recently. He's moved on to Washington State, I believe, so we'll still have to see him, unfortunately. But
just can't escape.
even with those losses at Incarnate Word, with the coach leaving, the quarterback leaving, it's still a tough team.
Yeah, they're sorry to cut in, but they're ranked 12th in the preseason Athlon poll and ninth in the Hero poll. So
yeah,
so that's a team with some expectations on them this season.
they've really elevated themselves quite a bit. Um, to be that high with a loss at quarterback and coach, that's respectable. But I don't know that they're going to stay a top 15 team in the country. I sure hope that they have a good season, but wouldn't it be fun to jam Nottingham and absolutely just shock the world on week 2? I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that'd be fun.
Then after that, I think is probably their most winnable game on the schedule. Definitely the first one they have a chance to be favored in, I'd say. They play Idaho State week 4. Yeah, the Bengals not projected to do a ton this year. I believe they're last in both the coaches poll, the media poll, and our poll. So they got the big 3 covered. It is in Idaho, or it is at Idaho State, so the Bears will have to go on the road. But that's a big chance for UNC to kick off conference play 1-0, which hasn't happened a ton historically.
Right. Well, and even with them renovating the Pocatello Dome, it's not going to matter. Idaho State, they're picked last, not as a disrespect to anybody, but because they were neglected, rejected, and dejected last year. Charlie Raggle did a real bang up job of just making the roster depressed and just kind of wasting a year of their time. It was bad football play. It was bad coaching. It was bad decisions. And that's coming from us having McCaffrey. We're over here like, wow, we're a dumpster fire, but that's pretty bad too. Thankfully, they're gonna write their future a little bit, getting baby Cody Hawkins from Dan Hawkins over at UC Davis. Have a father-son duo in the Big Sky. That'll be fun. But that's a lot for him to take on as a first-time head coach. I mean, he's got so much good experience from his dad. I mean, we even have some connection to that with the Hawkins family being a CU family. Having that.
Yeah, wasn't Cody Hawkins a quarterback on one of those CU teams?
Yeah, that it didn't go well. It went about as well as it did for the McCaffrey boys here, and also the Petrino boys in Idaho. Shout out Tubbs the Club, because they just love nepotism, and we hate it too. But here, Cody Hawkins, he's going to get a great chance to show that he can branch out from his dad, do his own thing. He's got all the knowledge, but man, that's a steep hill to climb with a roster that's feeling rough and a schedule that's pretty tough.
And the way you hear him talk about this season, I think Cody Hawkins is fully aware that it's a rebuild. It's pretty much the opposite of how Ed Lamb talks about this. Not the opposite, but it's it's much different than the way Ed Lamb talks about this UNC program. He knows it's going to take a couple years. So we'll just see how competitive they are this season. But after that, the Bears they host a couple tough ones with Weber State and then Sac State coming to town. Um, I don't think anybody's really giving UNC a chance in either of those two, but they could make either of those competitive before really what is probably their next winnable game, October 21st at Cal Poly. Um,
Right. October
Cal
is going to
Poly
be a
was the
rough. October is going to be a rough month for the Bears. I mean, I think the Latinx Heritage Day versus Weber State, that might be the highlight of the day. Um, Friends and
and
Family Weekend,
homecoming will be a highlight the next week.
yeah, that might be the highlight. But I mean, they have a chance because there's different coaches. But like you said, Cal Poly, that's a bit of a transitional program as well. They have another new head coach there, still trying to figure out what formation or roster they want because it was they were trying to go from triple option to spread, and now who knows what it's going to be. I mean, it's another Eastern Washington coach taking over. So shout out the pipeline, but even so, people have different philosophies. You're right. Cal Poly is going to be a
Yeah,
great chance for us to get a win. Um, and then we go to
I
Montana.
think I think Paul Wolf actually, or I think Bo Baldwin actually coached under Paul Wolf at one point. So I think their offensive system, their schemes are pretty similar. Um, but I completely agree. I think their biggest thing for Cal Poly will be their defense because they were bad last year. They felt like they would have been better off just like politely asking the other team to not score. But yeah, they're the one other team picked below UNC, kind of consensus wise. So that one will be interesting because after that they go to Montana and then host Idaho, which neither of those games are going to be easy.
Yeah, that might be ugly times for Bears fans, but that's gonna be it's gonna be measuring sticks. We got our butts absolutely whooped in Moscow, Idaho last year, and we never do well in Missoula. Missoula is a big, scary place for any FBS player with 26 angry, drunk Montanans screaming, yelling in maroon and silver, or God forbid they bring out the mac and cheese uniforms. But yeah, those are both scary games for us. That's going to be measuring sticks of just did we get better from the last time we played them. Um, it'd be wonderful to knock them off, but I mean, it's just going to be about keeping the roster healthy and trying to do your best. Trying to limit mistakes and learn from it.
Yeah, and I think it'll be good to see kind of how the team has grown over the season too. That because that's the time you want to be hitting your stride, especially if you're making a run towards the playoffs, which the Bears likely won't be. But it'll be a good couple late measuring stick games in the season before they play a couple that actually are winnable. I think they end the season at Northern Arizona, who they knocked off last year, before hosting Portland State to end the season. Two schools projected to be ahead of UNC, but not by much. So there's definitely a chance in both of those games, I'd say.
Yeah, I see this is the year that UNC finally goes into Flagstaff and finally gets a win. I'm gonna put my rubber stamp on it. I'll bet on it.
Yeah, so
Well,
for the non UNC and NAU fans that might be listening, what is it, 12
so it's
years in a row?
13 straight years or
The
13
home
straight
team is one.
straight matchups of these two, where the home team is won, and it's kind of butted into a fun little rivalry between um, Casey Everett, our Bear Den, and their what was it, Flagstaff 4000s or Lumberjack 4000s. There's definitely been some good social media rivalries, definitely some good jabbing between the some players on social media. It's the closest thing that we have to a rival because this is definitely one of the most competitive. We're both northern schools, it's a great rivalry. The Big Sky should make it a title rivalry for sure, just for fun, just like a trophy thing, like the Rocky Mountain Trophy or something. Shout out to Utah and Worcestershire. Think about it. We'll see. Yeah, there should be one of those rivalries just because it's so close, um, competitively the last couple of years. Yeah, I mean, like Nip versus Case Cookus, like those were some good back and forth. Actually, like really competitive games, kind of airing it out. Uh, Last year against NAU might have been the most exciting game nobody saw. Granted, I wasn't at the game either. I was, out of the country on vacation, but I was listening to it on the radio with our good providers over at 1310 KFKA, and that was just such an amazing drive. That was the one, like, just hang your hat on type moment the Bears had. That they had their own version of the drive where they went all the way down the field. They got their touchdown. They got their 2-point conversion. It was great, and it's just always kind of competitive between us two. I think Ed Lamb is just so much more motivated and has a lot more rolling in the right direction than Chris Ball has. He was supposed to be this splash hire from Memphis that was this defensive guru, and the Big Sky's a lot like the Big 12. We're not known for defense. It's all about offense, making big plays. When it is defense, it's a meat grinder on both sides, and I just don't think that they have the water to stand with us. Portland State, that's also another one of those teams that's been up and down. And just a few years ago, they had the top 5 recruiting class in the nation, and they really didn't do a whole lot with that. They had Anthony Adams, and he showed out and was a force in the Big Sky for a long time. And really now they're just down to relying on their scramble quarterback with a decent arm, Dante Sacheray. I mean, I don't think that can save them if we put a lot of pressure on them, because our secondary is where we are hanging our hat last year with our outside linebackers. So if we have that good coverage with a little bit of added pressure from Hogue and company, I think that game gets a lot more competitive and ends up in our favor, especially since that's going to be senior day. That's going to be last game of the season. Yeah, especially if they have a good performance in Flagstaff, they have every reason to get their 4th win of the year on senior day.
Yeah, I think you seem to be a little lower on Portland State than consensus, but I think you laid out a really good case for it, honestly. Um, so yeah, there's potentially 4 gettable games for the Bears, which at this point, 4 conference wins seems like a ton, because I can't remember the exact year, but it would have been Nip's freshman year, wouldn't it? Be the last time the Bears even sniffed 500 in conference.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I know we did have
Yeah,
2 6-5 seasons and 15 and 16. I think the better of the two was 15 conference wise. We'll have to double check that later on. But
yeah. I was trying to. If you can stall for like another half second, I could probably,
right,
I
use
could
some little
probably get
effort
there.
here. Yeah. No, the Bears have
Yeah,
a quite
20.
tough schedule.
Sorry, 2016 was the last
2016.
time the Bears, they went 4-4 in the Big Sky, under Ernest Collins, right before they gave him a nice extension that they fired him partway through.
Right, and I mean, like, that's the best that the Bears have done so far, and even that much was just electricity for the fan base. I mean, if we're looking at the conference polls, like, yeah, we're slated at 10, but you look at the 2 teams above us and 2 teams below us, and thankfully those 4 teams are on our schedule. So that's kind of why I'm pretty excited about Ed Lamb. I think he's gonna having a competent coach and still a healthier roster, because our roster was pretty banged up, and um, just having a focused and healthy approach. I mean, I think that gives us another 1 or 2 wins than last year. So that's kind of where I was coming from when I was looking at about 4 wins for the Bears. Is those Texas teams, they're going to be tough. They might squeak it out against Abilene Christian, but Incarnate Word probably going to put us in our place. But looking at Cal Poly, Idaho State should be wins. If they don't win that, something went wrong. Northern Arizona, Portland State, kind of coin flips, and if they're cooking with oil, might be a little bit more in our favor than we think.
Awesome. I think that about covers it for UNC. If you don't have anything else, Ben, let's take a break so you can listen to these ads that are definitely going to play um, before we come back. The Bear Claw podcast presented by Bear Claw Media. I'm Chris Bolin, joined by Ben Schleiger, if you forgot from last time. Feels a little late to mention, but I should say you can find our poll that we keep mentioning at bear-claw-media.com, along with just about everything else we've done. We're excited to get ramped up as football season gets into full swing here. But focusing on UNC, I think we spent a good chunk of time looking at the bottom of the big sky. So let's transition here to the top. Montana State seems to be the consensus best team in the conference, with good reason. They're top 5 in just about every national preseason poll as well. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the Bobcats this year, Ben? They're looking like they're going to have close to a repeat of the success they had last year.
Yeah, they just have so much talent. The thing about the Bobcats is there's not a lot of holes you can find. With these guys, they have Sean Chambers coming back. He comes over with Brett Vegan from Wyoming, just a really good gadget player that just absolutely buries the hatchet. Especially in the end zone. You know, he's still a quarterback, so technically he could throw. He's probably not going to do more than 20 or 30 yards, but he still has that dual threat ability. And with him and Tommy Mellott playing basically the same role, defenses are always on their heels, not sure what to do. They always got big mauling offensive linemen and decent running
Yeah, I
backs.
think it's pretty safe to say they probably have the best front on both sides of the ball in the
Oh
conference
yeah,
this year, wouldn't you say?
I would say so, and especially on the defensive side, their D line, pretty scary. I think Sebastian Valdez might even get some NFL attention later in the year if he's having another good year. With Montana State, there's it's a complete roster. You know, just trying to think of like which position would you attack. I don't have a solid one of that because you just have to bounce from who's tired basically. It's a good roster overall, and they're just going to return a lot, and I think they're fit for it.
Yeah, I guess the one downside you could really bring up about Montana State this year is that all their big games are on the road. They go to San Diego or South Dakota State. Sorry, I just wrote down SDSU. Confused myself.
You got
And
all
then
that
they go,
realignment talk on your mind.
and then they go to Weber, Sac State, Idaho, and Montana. So this will be a battle tested team by the end of the season. That's without a doubt.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, a tough schedule. Like they always say, iron sharpens iron, and if these guys are meant to be the sharpest sword, they will be. But yeah, it's tough. I don't think anybody's favoring them going into Brookings. Um, they really got shellacked by the Jackrabbits, and you know if the Jackrabbits are the top team to beat and Montana State is that second tier, there's a big gap between that. So hopefully Montana State can figure that out for their national title hopes and dreams. But they need to look to the conference first. I mean, Montana is going to be having an extra grind with them after last year, getting absolutely embarrassed in the Brawl of the Wild on uh, ESPN College Game Day. I mean, that's the worst loss that those guys will have in their 4 years. So, trying getting the game back in Missoula, they're going to be all hate, all grit. Um, they got to watch out. And they got to stay healthy for the end of the year because they got a straight up street fight waiting for them.
Yeah, and that game will surely have either Big Sky conference implications or playoff seeding implications, or that game's never meaningless at the end of the season. So yeah, let's go into Idaho, which seems to be the consensus number 2 pick in the conference. They have second year coach Jason Eck, coming back after a very successful first season. Um, I'm a little lower on the Vandals than just about everybody else. I think they have all the talent in the world, especially Giovanni McCoy, Hayden Hatton. They have
The
no
main,
lack of talent, but I just think the players at the skill positions they're just so young. It leaves so much room for error and so much room for variance because Giovanni McCoy just a sophomore, Anthony Woods only a sophomore, Hayden Haddon junior, so he has a little more experience under his belt. But still, that being said, I think between second and fourth in the conference is exactly where Idaho's should be projected and where they're going to end up.
right. It was pretty nice in our poll how them, Montana, and Weber State all ended up at a second place tie for us, just because that's kind of where we think the where the stew's going to get brewed at is just who's going to rise to the top, who's going to fall to the bottom. You know, those three teams are going to have to duke it out, and the other teams are on the outside looking in. Um, for those guys, I mean, I can see why the coaches rated them lower. They're probably thinking the same way you are. Is like, yeah, they got some great talent. They struck hot one year, but once you get film on somebody, it gets dangerous. Because just like Lamar Jackson, when he does a little fake out to the right, well, if you do that too many times, people are going to start guarding the right, and you can't go there anymore. So I think that's completely valid. Um, I don't know. I think they have so many weapons and so much diversity and parity on offense. They're still going to be a top three team. I have them at second just because I think offense matters more in the Big Sky right now. But we'll see where that ends up at the end of the year. I think the worry about young talent is definitely something, but that also could be the building of a superstar. I mean, Eastern Washington had a lot of young players that broke on the scene early, and they weren't just a flash in the pan.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Idaho can go either way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they'll have a good chance to see what some of those young guys are made of early on. They go to Nevada and Cal. Yeah, they have a realistic chance in both of those games, and they have a good chance to go 1-1. Realistically, they probably go 0-2. But then they do get to host Sac State, Montana, and Montana State. So we get a few of the big ones in conference coming to the Kibby Dome before they have to end the season going to Weber, which may also have a lot of conference and playoff implications on the line.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough stretch. The thing is, they don't avoid anybody. So if they do rise to the top, they have all the reason to be like, hey, we weren't perfect, or maybe they were perfect, and they came out exactly where they wanted to be.
Yeah, and honestly, I think they have as high of a ceiling this season as any team in the conference. If only for the fact if they do go into Nevada and into Cal and win both of those games, they're going to be getting talk as a top two, top even number one in the country program. So we'll just have to see what happens for the Vandals. Moving on, let's go to Weber State here. I think I'm a little higher on the Wildcats than you are. First year coach Mickey Mental. They're ranked 19th in the Athlon polls, tied for 11th in the Hero Sports. What are your thoughts on Weber this year, Ben?
So I like Weber. I think it's going to be a big hit to not have Jay Hill there. I mean, Jay Hill got them to some share of a conference title for 4 consecutive years under his reign. I mean, that's a lot of prestige and a lot of leadership to let go to an in-state FBS rival. Um, Weber State has a lot of really good talent on the team. It's just going to be, can they use that talent? Can they make it cohesive? I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but can you make it work for you? Because they have the preseason Big Sky defensive MVP on their team. I mean, they have a stacked roster on the defense of just guys who can create turnovers and just are nasty on that side of the ball. Offensively, I I think I that's kind of where my hesitation is they got a great defense with a lot of marquee guys. Are they going to be able to do the same thing on offense? Because offensively, run game has been a real strong point of theirs in the past. I think they can still continue that, but I'm not sure where the passing game is going to be.
Yeah, honestly, I think more than anything, what Weber has going for them is their schedule. They do have to face Montana State and Idaho, consensus top two teams, I'd say, but that's about it when it comes to conference play. They avoid Montana. They don't have to play Sac State, UC Davis. So they're getting a little bit of a break schedule wise, which is I think why I'm a little higher on them going into this year.
Right. I can definitely see that. And when we say consensus, we're going off of our poll and the media poll. Because, that one first place vote for UC Davis in the coaches poll, it keeps on making me think, was that Cody giving a little nod to old
Yeah,
dad?
and I feel like two out of the three, and they're bunched so tight with UC Davis, Sac State, um, and
Yeah, I
Weber
just
in
think
that
that like
coaches poll too.
our poll and the media poll are a little bit more focused on one set of thinking, and I think that's where the disparity is. I think the coaches poll might have gotten a little too hung up on schedule.
Yeah, definitely. All right, on to Montana. Head coach Bobby Houck in his second stint there. He's only 7 wins shy of the Big Sky record for head coaching wins. So honestly, in all likelihood, he's probably going to get that taken care of this year. Um, but the Grizzlies are, I think people are a little lower on them than they have been in the last couple years, just because it feels like the Grizzlies have burned some folks lately.
Yeah, it's tough. And, having Houck back for his second stint, it has not been as lucrative as the first time. Montana's always been known as this big, rough and tough brand, and they've been getting pushed around by a couple different teams over the past few years, and they just haven't found that share of the conference title so far, and that's the fans' expectations. When you got that big Wagriz stadium with 26,000, loud, rowdy fans, you got to keep it full by winning, and you know, they've had some good flashes in the pan, but injuries and transfers out to the FBS have just really hurt them in the sense of just having a great lineup, and then of course something happens, and Bobby's just got to right the ship. He's got to make it. He's got to make the roster come together and have a winning mentality rather than a stats mentality.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it sets up pretty favorable for the Grizz heading into the year. They play Ferris State week 3, a two-time reigning D2 champ, right?
Yeah, they won last year, and that's one of the things that I just do not understand where the administration was going from that. Is I wouldn't say that Houck's on a hot seat, but that's one of those games that does nothing for you. Playing the D2 national champ, all that can do is hurt you. If you perform poorly in it, be like, oh man, we were close to a D2 team this year. Are we gonna be okay? God forbid you lose to a D2 team. I don't want to know what that does to their ticket sales. And then if you quash them, okay, cool. You beat the D2 national champ. You should. And if you're not, you got some real thinking to do.
Yeah, yeah, really. That's it's not necessarily a lose-lose, but it's not too far from it. I do think one thing working in Montana's favor in that game is that that's really the only thing they have going important in the first like month plus of their season, really until the Idaho game, week 7. Um, so if they lose that's not a trap game by any means. If they don't play well in that one, it's because they got out coached, outplayed, and just outworked.
Right. I mean, if they wanted a tough D2 game, they could have looked locally and just gone to Central Washington, but they had to be spicy and choose the champs, even though they didn't know that years ago when they chose the schedule. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting year for Hauk, and it's all on him to make it end up good.
Awesome. Yeah, so like you mentioned earlier, 2 through 4 in our poll is all tied for second, which actually for me worked out perfect because that was really where I had a lot of the trouble deciding. But kind of as the couple weeks have gone on, I almost feel like Sac State could potentially be included in that group too, which is funny because the coaches have UC Davis second, and I'm not even mentioning them yet. Um, but but yeah, Sac State, Troy Taylor out of there to take the head coaching job at Stanford. Obviously, good for him. Andy Thompson looking to replace him. They're 15th in the Athlon poll to start the year and 10th in the Hero Sports poll. How are you feeling about Sac State? They're kind of in a weird spot going into this year.
You know, a weird spot is a great way to put it. Troy Taylor leaving to go to Stanford, which oddly enough they'll see him again later in the year. Um, it's such a weird spot for them to be in because it's been a very talented team the last couple years, and they have been utterly dominant in quite a few seasons. But I think they're going to be the ones who hurt the most from a coaching change, just because Troy Taylor might not have been as lucrative as a coach as Jay Hill was for Weber State, but in the sense of I don't think they necessarily get as high or as hot as they do without Troy Taylor. But I mean, like you were saying, with them being included in that, I could see that. Looking at the coaches poll, second place and sixth place are only divided by 12 points in the coaches poll, and then on the media poll, it's a lot bigger differences there because there's a lot more votes. But second place and sixth place is only divided by 90.
Yeah, and you can
So
definitely see a fair drop off after that sixth place in both polls, coaches and media. Like
yeah,
the
I think
difference
across
between sixth place in Eastern Washington is probably more than the difference between second and sixth place.
right. I think fan coaches and writers across the country kind of understand the split that both you and I saw to different degrees of just the top six have just so much more going for them, and they're built and cohesive and just so much more on track than those bottom six teams. Not to say that all of those teams are in rebuilding or transitioning, but they just have too many critical pieces that don't keep them in some sort of conference or spoiler position.
Yeah, so we've been mentioning the top six. Let's get to that sixth team. UC Davis. You mentioned earlier, I think Dan Hawkins. They 14th in the Athlon poll, 18th in Hero Sports. So, like we've been mentioning, right around that 2 through 4 or 2 through 5, 2 through 6 in the Big Sky range. Yeah, what do you think of the Aggies this year, Ben? I know they came into Greeley last year and just mollywopped the Bears.
Dan Hawkins has an interesting history of really having some roller coaster years. I mean, I can remember our first year at UNC, we beat UC Davis 56-27. We're like, wow, for us to go against a team like that, that's pretty special. Now it's at the point where UC Davis calmly comes into Greeley and it's like, hey, we got this. Um, Dan Hawkins is a really seasoned coach, but I don't know if the roster is as seasoned as he is. Um, it's just there's not a lot missing from what they need. It's just I don't think they have as high a caliber a roster across all of the positions as other teams do. Sacramento State has just a little bit more to the roster, just a little bit more closer to marquee players, and then that tie that we had 2 through 4. You could name marquee players very easily on both sides of the ball, and Montana State is just a slaughterhouse of talent. Um, so I think it's just going to depend on how much can Dan Hawkins do with just a little bit less than the top firepower of the conference.
Yeah, so we mentioned 6 teams there. Realistically, what would you say? 4 to 5 will likely make the playoffs. Probably 5.
I could see
So that
5.
means for us, we see one of either Sac State or UC Davis missing out. But I don't think I'd necessarily be too surprised if any team besides if Montana State missed the playoffs. I'd be pretty surprised. But beyond that, you could tell me a couple key guys get hurt or just things don't quite go right for some of these other teams. I'd be surprised if more than one of them really missed the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if any of those other Idaho, Weber State, Montana level teams did find themselves on the outside looking in at the end of the year.
Right. I would definitely say the teams we just highlighted are most definitely the top of the conference. Um, just because Montana State starts the year at the top of the conference. I mean, the Grizz always get a ton of love, not necessarily in the last few years, but they used to get a ton of love and be like, oh yeah, they're just going to outright take it. And then the season comes around, mid-season, it's like, we worry about it. And then end of season comes around and it's like, yeah, that didn't happen at all what we thought. So we'll see what happens. Montana State needs to show out on their marquee matchup with South Dakota State and Brookings. That's going to be a huge measuring stick for, are they the top of the Big Sky, and what part of the playoffs are they going to end up at? Can they keep on making those Frisco or almost Frisco appearances? Or is it going to be somebody else from our conference leading the charge to Frisco to, finally reclaim a national title for the Big Sky?
Awesome. Yeah, let's take one more break here. So all you lovely people can purchase the products that you're definitely about to hear about. And we will be back talking about some of the new coaches on the other side. All right, and we are back here on the Bear Claw podcast. Going into this season, we have 5 new coaches, Ben. I'd say they're kind of broken up into 2 different buckets, but I guess realistically more kind of 3 because Charlie Raggle's kind of in his own category.
Yeah, that's
At
more
the
of the give up category than was fired technically. But yeah, you're
hey,
right. There's a lot of new.
if giving up is taking on less responsibility for 3 times the pay, sign me up. I'll
That's
give up
true.
any day.
I wish our jobs let us do that. Just think and be like, oh, bigger paycheck? Yeah, why not?
But yeah, like we touched on it a little earlier. Troy Taylor leaving Sac State for the head coaching job at Stanford. That's a big leap, big sky to Pac-12, at least for now.
Well, he might be independent at this point.
And then Jay Hill leaving Weber State, like you mentioned, to be the D coordinator at BYU. Those are kind of that top tier, what you expect at the FCS level. Good coaches leaving for a better job. And then kind of on the flip side, you have Cal Poly replacing Bo Baldwin. I guess he could also be in that Charlie Raggle category. He took the offensive coordinator job at Arizona State after just, I believe, 1 year at Cal Poly.
I think it might have been 2.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're right. I think it was 2.
Either way, they're not enough years away from the triple option, so still a lot of work to do.
But and then like we mentioned, Ed Lamb combining a couple coaches here at UNC. So is there one of those guys that interests you more than the rest, or kind of take it in any way you want, Ben?
I think it's just interesting to see so many new faces in the Big Sky all at once, with kind of a premier FCS conference, Power Three, if you would say. You know, don't let's not change that up. Let's keep the realignment upstairs at the FBS. But yeah, as a Power Three conference, you know, the jobs are just so much more sought after. So when there is movement, it's a pretty big deal. The bottom teams, you kind of expect it. With us over here at UNC, just kind of had a revolving door the last couple of years. But you're right, there's definitely tiers. Um, Troy Taylor, a lot of success. He moved up. Jay Hill, same thing. Somebody saw a lot of talent and snagged him, and good on those guys. When you can move up, great for you. You know, at the FCS, we expect this is kind of like developmental football. We're not going to see you for the whole time. If you do stick around the whole time, great. But the expectation is we get as many good years as we can, and then they move on. Um,
Um,
our good buddy Bo Baldwin going on to ASU to join Charlie Raggle, the Idaho State quitter.
just
Um,
want to say, Bo Baldwin 3 years at Cal Poly. Not sure what I was thinking, but he
and
was
it's
there.
still not enough years away from the triple R. So if Spencer Brash can't get it done, I don't know who will over there. But good on them to lose to us this year. But um, with all those guys moving up, I get it. It's just they moved up under different circumstances. I mean, Cal Poly, if you got that chance, you may as well go up.
Yeah,
Especially with
and
so much heritage in the Big Sky, you may as well find a way to diversify yourself. Charlie Raggle was just trying to diversify his income.
honestly, I want they must have saw something in him because 1 year at Arizona or 1 year at Idaho State, winning one game, and then because he is taking a position above Bo Baldwin. Charlie Raggle's the associate head coach. Um, so yeah,
I mean, that's
who?
the new tone to worst to first.
um, so I think we are kind of in agreement as UNC homers, and proud that I think the Cal Poly rebuild and the Idaho State rebuild might be a little tougher than what Ed Lamb's facing at UNC. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely jump on that bandwagon. As sporty UNC as we are, we're both realists. We've been fans of UNC since 2015 or a little bit earlier for some of us, and after about a decade of Bears fandom, and only having two winning seasons, which let's grant it, it was just miraculous miracles
At the
for us.
beginning of that decade, we
Right.
should add.
Got our college years all excited. Ooh, we're winning now. Ah, well, that didn't last long. Um, but yeah, we're realists in the sense of we've seen enough losses to know that we're in the bottom third of the conference. But we also have Ed Lamb who took over a worst to first type team. Now I don't think we're going worst to first. This is a lot different landscape, even in the few years difference from him being at Southern Utah to being at BYU for 6 years and coming back. Even in that time, the Big Sky has changed a lot. The FCS has changed a lot, just in the sense that the arms race for talent is so much more intense. But at least he has the experience of and the roadmap of how to get there. It's just whether or not he can adapt it to a current form of what we need it to be. And
Yeah,
honestly, as long as he gets to winning seasons, I think he'll be able to stick around, develop that, and kind of develop a culture around here.
yeah, it's we're in a great spot right now, Ben. Nothing better as a sports fan than having hope, and our hope was misplaced the last couple seasons. I think you saw through the McCaffrey facade a little bit earlier on than I did.
Yeah, I think
Um,
me and Jaden Adams saw some of the disgruntled players, and while the Tribune's take was much more negative and much more jumping on it, even though my articles over at College Sports Journal before founding this, um,
plug.
they weren't, shout out Chuck Burton. Um, Even though they weren't as negative, I definitely saw a lot of the impacts of it. There was some starters, a lot of backups, and you get that when you have that regime change. There's going to be upsetted parties. There's going to be parties where there's not a place for you anymore. But it was more than that. It was more negative. It was more neglective behavior. Honestly, it was a lot like talking to kids that just had a bad parenting experience. Nothing really was going right in the house, especially for their positions. And when everybody's losing, everything just seems so much worse than it is. And I think a lot of those kids just really they needed somebody to tell them it was okay, even if it wasn't. And I think even that wasn't there. So just Ed Lamb's, build it up, family type, wholesome atmosphere. I think even just having that, even just, work on your schoolwork, even if you're not like at where you want to be at athletically. I think that building up the person and developmental culture, I think that's where the school needs to be at, even if it doesn't get us to winning ways. But he does have the history to do it.
Yeah, I we could probably go on for a long time about McCaffrey, but that honestly, mark it down. That's a different pod. Um,
We're going from our Terrell Davis O's cereal to almost Honey Nut Cheerios.
yeah, we're pushing name brand at this point. So
Right? We're almost
yeah,
there. We just got to prove it.
awesome. Well, I think that'll do it for us today. Thanks for listening in. Episode 1. You can say you were here for humble beginnings. Please rate and review. It's extremely helpful to get this podcast out there, to get it seen. Please, we'd love if you check out the website, bear-claw-media.com. You can find a lot of UNC stuff, some greater Big Sky stuff. We did a little pro stuff in the off season, all the social medias, and we'll be on YouTube, everything. Please leave comments. We love your feedback. We want to do this better, and we want to do it right in a way that you guys will enjoy.
Yeah, biggest thing
Yes.
is we're starting small, but we're looking big. We might be Bears fans, but we pay attention to the Big Sky. We pay attention to other universities in Colorado. We pay attention to the pro sports here. Our main bread and butter is obviously UNC, since that's what we're closest to. Driving and seeing stuff in person. But we definitely have some experience with the Big Sky, FCS, and other Colorado sports. So see a little bit of everything from us, but mostly Bears coverage. And even though we got the Bears hat on, we're still realists at the end of the day.
I have the America hat on, so I'm
There you go.
covered. Awesome. Yeah, I think that'll do it for today. We will be back at least before the first game with a little preview pod for that, if not earlier. So keep an eye out. I've been Chris Bolin.
And I'm Ben Schleiger, and thanks for joining us, guys.